Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
He's an ex-deputy in Texas. He got into a fatal shooting, was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years. He says he's innocent, and innuendo and rumors got him convicted. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Joining us from Texas, we have Kent McGowen. He's an ex-law enforcement officer. He was involved in a fatal shooting, which we will talk about. He was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. This became subject of a book called Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder, and was written by New York City author Jerry Langton. Best place to find Kent is on Facebook. Look for details. Just search for Kent McGowen, McGowen 2025. Kent, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, talking about this. Very much appreciated.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Now, I got to say this. One of the things that I very rarely do I get into with people, but they'll say especially on my Facebook page, the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page, they'll make comments, police never turn on each other, nothing about around. I just don't want to say, and I don't say it most of the time because I know I'm not the you-know-what whisperer. I'm not going to change someone from being an idiot. Google them. There's people, you did 19 years in prison, and there's a lot of rumors out there that you were convicted off innuendo and rumors.
Yes, sir, exactly. That's exactly what happened.
First of all, how much time did you serve?
I served 19 years, 4 months, and 4 days on a 20-year sentence on a murder charge.
And how long did you have, how many opportunities did you have for parole?
I was eligible for parole for 15 years. I came out with my 10th time for parole. I was finally let out 8.5 months early.
So is it safe to say you didn't do an easy stretch?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because of the who I was and the situation, being who I am, it made it exponentially more dangerous and difficult than probably any other inmate at the time. Because of safety and security issues, I went to 20 different units. Got bounced around quite a bit during this.
Right. I say right. I've never been in prison. I don't know, but I know many men that have. And one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, a lot of these guys become institutionalized men, and they have a hard time acclimating to freedom afterwards, where they can get up when they want, eat when they want. What times are you making a successful transition?
The whole time in there, I absolutely did not. Every day, do not be institutionalized. The only prison jargon I used was chow hall. But yeah, and then when I got out, I'd never seen a cell phone or smartphone. I'd never Googled, none of that stuff. So, and then I maintained who I was throughout the whole time, which that caused me issues.
I'm sure it did.
When I got out, it was a struggle.
Well, and by the way, so the world changed. There was a lot of technological changes. What years were you imprisoned?
I went in on March 10th of 2002, and I was released on July 14th, 2021.
Is it safe to say that things changed a lot between the years you went in and came out?
Indeed, sir. Yes, it absolutely did. When I was, I'm a pretty sharp guy, and I'm a pretty tough guy, and I had some fantastic mentors, law enforcement, military guys. They were telling me, hey, you need to prepare. It's not like it was 20 years ago. And then in a short time period before I was let out, I had a lot of family members pass away in a short time period, including my mom, my dad, my son, and my sister. And when I got out, the Houston police officers picked me up, actually, from the prison. And, first thing I did when I got a cell phone is I Googled my son's memorial page. And I tell you, I almost did not make it my first 3 weeks. All this stuff just hit me like a freight train, because when you're locked up, you can't you got to worry about surviving for the people that are remaining out there for you. And it's extremely difficult. But yeah, when I got out, I struggled, learning about banking, self-checkouts, driving. That's a whole crazy story. I got my driver's license after not driving for 20 years. But it was extremely difficult. But I had, family members, mentors, countless law enforcement officers, from my day, came forward. My brother did 31 years on the job, an impeccable career. And it's, thank goodness for those people, and the support. And I eventually, learned how to survive and remarkably well, because I know a lot of people that were in prison, like you said, I know some police officers that are in there and they've gotten out and they did not handle it well. They're not able to function out. They are out in the free world. So it is a difficult task.
I don't wish that on anybody. And by the way, I've been in prisons many times to help volunteer, and one thing I say is I couldn't be an inmate and I couldn't be a CO because of the noise level. I would never let my guard down.
Yeah, it is 24/7, screaming, hollering, banging on the steel toilets, kicking doors. It's never dark, it's never peaceful, it's never quiet, and it's never nonviolent and completely insane, nonstop. Particularly in Texas, I know about Texas. It's a mess.
Where are you living now? Are you in a city where it's noisy, or are you out in the country?
No, I have a house in suburbs of Houston, and then a farm up here in Deep East Texas. That's where I am now, at the farm, where it's nice and peaceful out here.
And one of the things I would think that would be a bit of adjustment, and we'll get into some stories about what caused this and your actual story. But one thing I'm very curious about, Kent, is I would think it would be like night and day difference being on a farm and being in prison, just the noise level alone, and being around possible threats all the time.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Just from the job, as I'm sure I'm very leery of people, but I have received some death threats and stuff since I've been out. Some of the people who are responsible for this, but I'm not where I live out here on the farm. It's out in the middle of nowhere. I spend most of my time out here, but I am wary. I'm still wary. I don't like being around crowds. Just different things. I guess trigger word would be what, some sounds that really disturb me. As like if I'm watching TV and there's an alarm go off in a house because that's during the shooting that happened, that definitely is like a trigger situation for me. I just get up and walk out or whatever.
Before we go to break, which is coming up very soon, I've got to ask you this question. You were paroled after 19 years. What is your status now with the case?
Yeah, I got off parole. I had 8.5 months. I got off parole on my 20th anniversary, which was March 10th of 2022. I was released from parole.
So, I'm not saying this to be negative. Would you be classified as a convict, or were you freed, or what's the status?
Yeah, I guess legally it's considered a convicted felon at the moment, but we have attorneys working on that. We're searching for legal avenues to get this felony off my back, because everybody knows what happened. So we're just going through the legal necessities now to get that felony off my back.
The other thing is, and before you break very quickly, one of the things I struggle with sometimes is I feel like I need to defend myself when I didn't do anything wrong. Do you still feel a need to be defensive about it?
I'm extremely defensive about it. This negative tabloid trash publicity, it not only destroyed me, it has utterly destroyed my entire family, socially, financially, professionally, and otherwise. And I do honestly, I actually believe that the stress caused the death of my mom, my dad, and my eldest son that my wife and I had when we were teenagers.
I believe you 150%. That's a big part of it. And that's part of the reason why we do this show. And when we return on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we're going to talk about how things went bad, the incident. And there's really no way of sugarcoating it. What led to his arrest, his trial, his conviction, all that stuff in the book. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We're talking with Kent McGowen. He's an ex-law enforcement officer. He was arrested, tried, and convicted for a fatal shooting. He did more than 19 years. He's the subject of the book, Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder. It was written by New York City author Jerry Langton. Best place to find him is on Facebook. Just look for Kent McGowen 2025. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back. If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com. Return our conversation with Kent McGowen. He's an ex-law enforcement officer in Texas, and that's where his content is from. And he got into a fatal shooting, was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. He's subject to the book Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder, was written by New York City author Jerry Langton. Best place to find Kent is on Facebook. Just do a Facebook search and look for Kent McGowen. It's McGowen 2025, and you'll find him. Kent, first of all, before we get into your story, are you doing okay today?
Yes, sir, generally. Yes, sir, now I finally got up on my feet. It's a struggle. It is every day. I work on this every day and then worry about it all night long.
Look, I don't know how you would not. First of all, the police stuff, that's something we have in common. I have a neighbor, for example. I walk my dog, and he's a service dog. He's never been trained. He's a Rottweiler. He keeps people away. He's a great dog. But he said to me one day, he goes, "Are you retired police?" I'm like, "Why?" "Yeah." He goes, "Because you don't talk to nobody." And the truth is, I want to keep people at a distance. And I didn't go through what you went through.
I can definitely relate. I have my inner circle of a handful of very tight police officers that have been with me once since high school. And basically my family. I don't deal with many people. I mean, I do, like, since a book came out, people like you, but I deal with very few people. I have a very
I don't blame you. I don't blame you on that at all. So let's talk about the 800-pound elephant in the room. How did this even happen?
Well, I was in service of a felony warrant on a suspect on a felony retaliation charge. And we went to the house, and I've knocked on many doors of felony warrants, but this is the one time I knocked on the door, because of who the suspect was. And when she came to the door, she was clearly intoxicated. And at this point, there was another deputy at the front door, another one in the back. So after 15 minutes of her calling 911, calling the dispatch, she would not open the door. So a supervisor gave me an order. He said, "I'm listening that, monitored radio, y'all need to force entry." So, all right. So we tried to make entry at the front door, but it was a big solid door. So I went around the back and made entry with a second deputy. And he forced the door in, and at this point he tripped and fell, and I went over to cover him. And the house was completely trashed. And this is 1:30 in the morning. So of course it was dark, flashlights. When the door crashed in, the alarm went off. We made entry. And I clear the left side of the residence, if you will. I look to the right side to clear, and I see a suspect crossing. There's a door on the opposite end of the living room, which was in the bedroom suite. I see a suspect crossing right to left. I saw something in her hand. I thought it was a phone. She was running around with a mobile phone, and I knew all this was being recorded, of course. But I beeline toward the suspect, and then I lean in the door. Suspect's to my left around the corner, and stand next to the bed, ready to shoot us, try to ambush us moving in. She had the weapon in her right hand pointed at me. I told her twice, "Commander, drop the gun." She
had a weapon pointed at you?
Correct, in her right hand, yeah, pointed right at me. The suspect, she never said a word to me. And because you're a law enforcement, you literally do tunnel vision. I watched the gun in her hand, split second I saw it. That's the only way someone's going to kill you is with their hands. I tell her, "Drop the weapon." I said, "Drop the gun, drop the gun." And after that, she comes up, and she still had it indexed. Her finger wasn't on the trigger. I see her put her finger on it, and I remember this like it happened 2 minutes ago, slow motion. I see her put her finger on the trigger, and I holler a third time, "My commander, drop the gun, I'm going to shoot." I see her starting to flex on the trigger, and I fired 3 rounds, and the first one was fatal. And she spun her left, landed on her left side, but face down. At this point, the deputy's at the front door with me. I didn't know he was behind us. He goes and jumps on the suspect, and I do not recall for whatever reason I did my flashlight, but I remember I had my handcuffs out. She always cuffed the suspect. I didn't know she was hit. I didn't know if she just jumped on the bed or what. And then I went up, and both the other deputy and myself, we see her with the weapon was in her right hand under her right knee. And then the other deputy looked at her, and he said, he said she's deceased, So we back up, call for supervisor and the EMS in the package, which is, of course, is internal affairs, homicide, DA's office, whatever. And so everybody, a bunch of people made the scene. The scene was ridiculous. There was no photographs of the scene, no video, no measurements, no test for gunshot residue. Mind you, this is in 1992. And the sheriff.
All that stuff should have been done anyway. And there was standard procedure in Baltimore. I want to interrupt you. This person was armed with a gun, and you wound up shooting him. And you had a lawful, a regulated reason for being there. Yes, sir, exactly. So what is the problem? Well, the problem stems from one of my partners and I. He wound up in 17 years in prison over this, and which started all this craziness because it was a clean shoot. Let me interject this. I was cleared by internal affairs and homicide. Look, as a retired sergeant, I would have no problem. I don't. When I say no problem with the legalities of it, that doesn't mean that I'm okay with it being shooting. No police I know wants to take a life. They just don't want to do it. It's not something we're organized. We don't think that way. But when I asked 3 questions, you had a right to be there. You had a warrant. Yeah. They were armed. They're pointing at you, and you fired. It should be an open and shut case. Exactly. There should be nothing beyond that. I'm struggling to see where the allegations where you did something wrong. Well, what it stems from is when I was an instructor, we had an administrative sergeant. He was never our supervisor. And the day after my shooting, this bureau commander promoted that sergeant with no experience to lieutenant in charge of homicide the day after my shooting. Right. But that still doesn't account for evidence, and we need evidence to commit people in court. And what I'm getting at is I don't hear anything. There's nothing negative. Exactly. That's what this lieutenant, he was feeding information. There actually have pictures that he unlawfully secured somehow and leaked out the information in the grand jury. But it was this guy, and I've been asked that many times. It has to be like a conspiracy. Well, you're in law enforcement. You know how it is. If you got somebody within your own agency that's got a for you, they're going to get you. Well, here's one of the things that I just say from personal experience. And when we investigate shootings, fatal shootings, homicides, if that's the term you want, you're going to start with some, I would say, speculation of why this occurred. Then the evidence dictates where you go from there. It's all right for them to have rumors and speculation. However, when the evidence to support that, there's got to be a cut from that. And that's why I don't see happening with your case. Yeah, there was ballistics, forensics, everything. And these two deputies were that were backing me up on this. I wasn't even like friends with these guys. It's not like they're going to try to cover for them. To this very day, they back me up. Our stories have never wavered. And that's why I was cleared by everybody. And it was this homicide lieutenant and his DA investigator buddy. They just had a personal issue with a group of us down there. And there's at least 6 of us from the sheriff's department back then that have been to prison over this, or they lost their careers because if you stood up to this little clique, that's what went down. And I want to close on this before we go to break. Houston had a reputation, and I'm not saying they have that now. I think it's really changed, but back in the 80s and 90s, I actually looked at going to Houston from Baltimore. But there was a lot of rumors and things done underhanded that shied people like me away from it. And that kind of sounds like what happened to you. Yes, it was. And were you aware of these rumors and when you took the job? Because my years at Houston PD, I never saw that. It's a whole different ballgame. When I went to the county, I was shocked. I mean, from day one, what I saw going on in there. It's a totally different ball of wax. There's unsupervised, untrained. I was an instructor there, and they wouldn't even let us train these guys like they needed to be trained. They were just shoving them through. We're going to talk. We're talking with Kent McGowen. He's the ex-law enforcement officer in Texas. He got in a fatal shooting, which we'll return to in a few moments. He was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. He's subject to the book Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder, is written by New York City author Jerry Langton. And the best place to find him is on Facebook. Look for Kent McGowen 2025. It's spelled McGowen. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll take a short break. I promise you, we'll be right back.
Someone asked, what's the catch? What's the cost? There is no cost for anything on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast website, letradio.com. letradio.com. Again, that's letradio.com.
Returning to conversation with Kent McGowen. He's an ex-law enforcement officer in Texas. He got into a fatal shooting, was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. He's subject to the book Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder. Finally got the title right. It was written by New York City author Jerry Langton, and the best place to find him is on Facebook. Just look for Kent McGowen, McGowen 2025. Kent, I want to go back to a particularly difficult time. You had this fatal shooting. That's not fun. I don't care what people think. It's not a good time at all. Because you were cleared by your IID, which sounds like they made the right call. When did you become aware that things were not going well?
Well, after, as you well know, if you're involved in an officer-involved shooting, they take your weapon, just formally, do the ballistics, whatever. 3 nights later, they called me back to go get my weapon. And in the course of that, I talked to, it was the same, down here we call them CSI, crime scene investigators. The same CSI guy who has made the shooting scene, something came up about the suspect's weapon because it was chrome plated. He mentioned there's no fingerprints on it. So what do you mean there's no fingerprints on it? I said, mine are on it. And I picked it up with my left pinky in the trigger guard. I immediately called my union lawyer and said, man, something's going on. They said, yeah, we're getting wind of some crazy stuff. And the shooting occurred on August 25 of 92. And then just a bunch of insane stuff was going on. People calling us, giving us information, what's going on in the background. And then I went to the grand jury, which usually down here on a police shooting is 4 to 6 hours to hear it. Mine dragged on for 6 weeks. Excuse me. And then they called me in, and I testified for 4 hours and 45 minutes. Man,
which is a very long time.
How to go?
When police get called in a grand jury, and I understand you, and I guess I'll form this as a question. You viewed yourself as a good guy, and you've got nothing to hide. I'm going to tell them the truth. Right.
Yeah, and I knew what those DAs are saying. I knew these guys are angling for something because they asked very little about the actual shooting. It was like, what about this and this? I'm like going, well, it doesn't even matter, And then on October 28th of 92, I got a call from my major, my bureau commander, who I personally knew, and he was kind of talking quietly, and he said, hey, I need you to come to internal affairs. I said, all right. And he kind of whispered, and he said, hey, bring your lawyer. So I'm like, what? And so I called my union lawyer, and great guy, retired Houston PD sergeant, and he said, hey, they're going to probably suspend you for 1, 2, 3 days, just fishing days. We'll get your money back. Don't worry about it. Come get me. So when I got my lawyer, we showed up at the detective bureau, and went to ID. And my major was in the ID captain's chair, and standing next to him was ID captain, homicide captain, and an older detective I've never seen before or since. But major said, hey, sit down. He goes, I have something I got to tell you. There's no easy way to tell you this. I'm like, yeah. I thought it would say you're suspended for 3 days over just the tabloid trash stuff going on. He said, they handed down a sealed indictment today. I didn't even know what to say. The lawyer goes, for what? And he said, murder. I literally felt like I got slammed across the chest with a baseball bat.
I would imagine so. I can't think of anybody who wants to go through. I was in 4 shootings in 10 years, and everybody survived, thank God. But yours was before the advent of body cameras?
Oh, yeah, way before body cameras.
Would that have made a big difference in your case?
This would absolutely have never happened if, A, we had body cameras, and B, if the DA would not have withheld a witness that I would have never gotten indicted.
By the way,
involved in this one brought forward.
There's many DAs that have been phenomenal, and there's also been some that have been shady. And my experience, and I'll give you an example. You can have a case. I would say you go with the case you have. They don't want to try it. They want a court. Let's get a conviction. And I had a guest on recently that talks about, I think 35%, and I might be butchering this, 35% of all cases are overturned because of judicial misfeasance by district attorneys, and they're withholding evidence.
Yes.
Was that the case for you?
Exactly. The Civil Rights Division, they investigate. They call it something different now, but they investigate police shootings, and they were just gunning for them back then for any law enforcement officer, particularly the sheriff's department, because this is election time. The sheriff and DA hate each other, just trying to make each other look bad. I fell into that political situation. But yeah, when I got indicted, I didn't know what to say. When that old detective in there, I'd never seen him before or since, he said, Deputy McGowen, he goes, I've been here 46 years. He said, I've done hundreds of police shootings, thousands of homicides. This is the cleanest shoot I've ever seen. He said, what scared to me and everybody, this could be any one of us sitting there. And
yeah,
so
that's the thing that disturbs me about this whole conversation, because and I'm going to ask you one more time. There's absolutely nothing that you did. You had a right to be there. They pointed a gun at you, and you fired. End of story.
Exactly.
There's nothing else to it. Is there anything else? What did they hang the whole case on? That's
it. It was self-defense, defense of a third party, my brother deputies. What they hung it on was these rumors. And when I went to trial, actually the ballistics, that played very little part in it. It was absolute character assassination. And in the background was this homicide lieutenant feeding everybody and his DA investigator buddy. If they'd done this to a lot of law enforcement officers, I'm absolutely not. They weren't just picking on me. Like I said, they set up my partner. He did 17 years in prison because of these guys. But they just brought in, because you're a policeman. I had thousands of friends, law enforcement buddies since I was 17.
Right.
And then they've got like 5 or 6 officers that for one reason I didn't. Some of them I didn't even know. Then they started bringing in people I'd arrested. You know how many people I'd arrested, sent to jail and prison? They're bringing in witnesses. My lawyer's like, who's that? Dude, I have no idea. Some guy arrested 5 years earlier, and he thought I was mean to him or something. And they, in the jury, they're police haters, and the jury I went to trial. My first trial was in 1994. I was convicted and got 15 years. And the judge said the entire time, he said from the jury, there's no way I'm sending you to prison. The law allowed me to keep you out. Great judge. He's a World War II POW, great guy. And then I got found guilty at 15. Back then in Texas, if you got 15 or less, you stay on appellate bond. So I was on appellate bond nearly 9.5 years, longer as I know of today even. And my case was overturned 4 out of 4 times because of this nonsense. Brilliant appellate lawyer. And then in 2001, because in Texas, if you win an appeal, the state can appeal it. The various courts for different reasons. So that bounced around for 9.5 years. And then March of 2001, they lost their last appeal. And they kept saying, we're not going to retry them, which we knew they were lying. And so they bounced right back, going after, we're going to put you in prison. You're doing life. And then I hired the wrong attorney, to say the very least, at that point. I went
before
to trial.
Before you go that, the retrial, they said you're going to spend life in prison, is what you said. Based off of what?
That,
what is there to hang your hat on?
Yeah, in Texas, and both my lawyers, in both trials, we discussed this. You can do a lesser included offense. Like, say, okay, you're charged with murder, but you can charge a jury with, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, negligent homicide. And my lawyer said, no way, because we're not going to let the jury go, we can't figure out what's going on. We're going to give you 15 years on a manslaughter charge.
Right.
And both sides of the lawyer said there's no way they're going to convict you on murder. So we went for the whole enchilada, as my lawyers stated it. And
here's what I'm getting at, and I want to ask you one more time. There's got to be, what did they build their case off of? Because there's nothing with what you talked about, the facts of the case. And now, not every trial is fact-based. There's other things that are brought into it. What did they decide to prosecute you on?
It was absolute character assassination. They had 5 police officers that none of them were tight with me. I'm going to work with one, whatever. And they came in there and said that I had a reputation as being, because this is in the 80s. I was a braggart, loudmouth. I guess, all of us were back in the 80s. But they just didn't like me for personal. Out of thousands I knew, they found 5 that had a personal issue with me. And they said that I had a reputation as not being truthful for this. Juries are handyman and lawnmower guys, and the girl works at the grocery store. They don't know the law. No. So the juror said, well, McGowen didn't testify. My second trial did not. So they said, we don't even know what happened. So
what we had was you had other people brought in, and they gave opinions based off what they thought of you, but the facts speak differently. Am I getting anything wrong?
No, that's exactly right. Yeah. They didn't even get the facts of the actual shooting are basically irrelevant.
That's the part I'm getting at. We're running out of time. I'm going to go to break here really quick. When we return, we're going to talk about being sentenced to prison and rebuilding his life afterwards, because there's so much more we could talk about with this interview with Kent McGowen. He's an ex-law enforcement officer in Texas. He got into a fatal shooting, was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. He's subject to the book, Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder, written by New York City author Jerry Langton. And the best place to find him is on Facebook. Just look for Kent McGowen. That's spelled McGowen 2025. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
I try to start my day every day with Rooms on the Clubhouse audio app that is free. Think of the Clubhouse app as your own talk radio station, and best of all, it is free. And make sure that after you download the Clubhouse app that you follow John J. Wiley or look for @LET Radio Show. That's the free Clubhouse app, and follow John J. Wiley or look for @LET Radio Show.
We're in a conversation with Kent McGowen on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and I'll be honest with you, this is a difficult conversation. He's an ex-law enforcement officer in Texas. He got into a fatal shooting, was arrested, tried, convicted, did more than 19 years in prison. He's subject to the book Reasonable Doubts, How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder, was written by New York City author Jerry Langton. Best place to find Kent and to get more details, contact him is on Facebook. Look for Kent McGowen, spelled McGowen 2025. Kent, again, and I won't sound like a broken record, you had a warrant to be on premises. The suspect pointing the gun at you, you fired, they were killed, end of story. There's nothing else to it. We look at the warrant. Was that question, did they come and say there's something? Because I'll be honest with you, a lot of your prosecution sounds like it's politically motivated. So what was the things I would look at if it were me would be the warrant, number one. Did you plant the gun, number two, and then number three, did you lie about it?
Yeah, the loophole, if you will, they got me on the state's case, because there's no question about she had the weapon. It was registered to her. She illegally bought it as a felon and whatnot. But they said that I lied to get the warrant. Therefore, the warrant was not lawful. Therefore, forced entry was not lawful. Therefore, self-defense, defense of a third party was not lawful. That's not against the law. Every state, probably on Texas and federal law, is you cannot resist arrest, even if that arrest is unlawful.
Right. That's what God made courts and lawyers for.
Yeah, and in the way that my second trial, they charged the jury. They allowed the jury to make the decision whether it was self-defense or not. That's not the jury's decision to make. But in the documents that we've recovered since, it was completely lawful. Since I got out, these witnesses and documents that have come up. So that's what we're dealing with right now to get this.
And there's a lot to that, where the warrant is lawful. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's the case with you, but if there is an officer that wants to go after someone for unscrupulous reasons, and you get a warrant, a search warrant, it could throw everything out. The fruits of the poisonous trees, they call it. So exactly. we don't want that. And everything happens after that is open to interpretation, but your warrant was determined to be legal.
Correct, afterward, yes, absolutely.
So you get convicted, and that must have hit you like a sledgehammer in the chest.
You have no idea. In my second trial, when they said guilty, I'm going to try to get choked up here. I heard my mother wail, and then that was on a Friday, and that weekend, of course, the judge pulled my bond, put me in jail. And that was on a Friday, which is my birthday, my anniversary, and Easter. And it went back Monday because Texas has an innocent and guilt phase, and then they have a punishment phase if you're found guilty.
Uh-huh.
And so we got Monday for the punishment phase. I was standing there, and it was bizarre. It was like I'm not even there. I'm like, I couldn't get this in my mind. This is all because this is like 10 years after the shooting. I'm like, this is all just. It was bizarre. It was like unreal. It was surreal is what it was.
Did you ever think you'd be in that position as a law enforcement officer, that you'd be in a trial and you'd be the bad guy? Never.
That's what's so bizarre. Since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a police officer. My brother was. He's a number of years older than me, and I admired him. So I went in the Air Force when I was 17. So starting my law enforcement career. Never. It was over nothing. And the only thing that could possibly make this worse is if I did do something stupid, let alone illegal, And what I said to my family, I would have never made it through prison. What my family went through, if it was something I would have done, I would not have made it through prison. I couldn't have lived with that.
How do you keep an attitude where you're not angry all the time? Because I'd be severely angry. I'm still angry over stuff that was from the mid to late 80s.
You know, I'm extremely angry. You know, and I've had people say, you know, you sound vengeful. It's not. I'm not seeking vengeance. I'm seeking justice.
I would be seeking vengeance. Look, I'll be honest with you. I'm like to be a Hollywood movie. Yeah, I'd be the guy with two guns. I'd be Clint Eastwood. I'd be like, yeah, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, well, that would be understandable but illegal.
I hear you.
But these bad guys who did it, like I said, they've done this to other people. And let me tell you this real quick. In 2014, the Texas Rangers got involved, and they did a 4.5-year investigation. And I remember one of my meetings with this Texas Ranger, great guy, man. And he said, let me see if I get this right, Kent. He said, you and this other deputy, my partner, both of you guys had problems with this sergeant and later homicide lieutenant. I said, yeah. And he goes, and he winds up as a lead investigator on both y'all's cases, knowing y'all did nothing wrong.
That should never happen. He should not be involved in the case.
Yeah, and then exactly. And then the Ranger, he said, both you guys go to prison. He goes, man, this has raised no red flags for anybody. At that point, it had been 25 years. And I said, man, I've been honest for 25 years. No one's listening. And he goes, well, what did this lieutenant testify against you at your trial? He never testified against me. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, because it would have come out as animosity toward us. He's just playing, he's making the moves in the background. And then he said, well, who from Internal Affairs testified against you? I said, no one. I was cleared by ID. It was who from Homicide testified against you? No one. I was cleared. And he goes, how in the heck did you get convicted twice? I said, man, dude, I'm fighting a corrupt system. People, on the job, going after us. And it's hard to hire a bad lawyer, to say the very least.
One of the things that we used to say is, and we had a lot of guys, and I say guys, that's men and women, that were officers of the year 1 year, and then criminally charged the next year. And I'd say it's a very short trip from the spotlight of good to the spotlight of them not looking at you like you're a threat to their survival.
Yeah, roger that. Absolutely. It's a bizarre situation. When you got somebody out there gunning for you, they're going to get you. They're going to get you.
How did you get connected with the Jerry Langton, the author?
Oddly enough, through another a renowned writer named Alan Warren in Vancouver, and he's been a mentor of mine for like 4 years, and he interviewed Jerry Langton on another book. And he called me and he said, hey, I've got this guy. You haven't written your book? I said, no. He goes, I've got the perfect guy for you. And so he gave Jerry my number, and Jerry reached out and contacted me. And Jerry writes a lot of books about mafia, drug cartels, biker gangs. This is not his genre type deal. And then I talked to Jerry, and he just latched on to this. And he took this on as a mission. It took 15 months to write the book. And for 9 months, every Monday through Friday, we had a Zoom call from 1 to 3 o'clock. From 1 to 3 hours. And thousands of texts and emails and documents sent back and forth. In the course of this, I had a retired FBI supervisor agent in charge about 4 years ago reached out to me. He did a 3-year investigation. This is since I've been out. And we recovered more than 100,000 pages of documents we had never before seen. It not only proves that I was set up, but we have definitive proof on who set me up, how they did it, and their devious motives. And not only set me up, but several other officers. There's another guy that I worked with at the Sheriff's Department. He's got 3 40-year sentences and a 10-year sentence set up by the same guy. He'll probably do the rest of his life in prison, And we're trying to help him. I help a lot of officers in prison from around the country.
I really don't. I wish I knew something to say to make it. And the sad truth is, you can't make it all go away. And as a sergeant, when I retired as a sergeant, I had officers involved in shootings, and the very first things I'd say to them was, you don't talk to anybody until you talk to a lawyer. You don't talk to me. Right. You don't talk to homicide. You don't talk to anybody. Because you got certain basic human rights, and we want to make sure that they're honored. Look, I wish that, first of all, this needs to be made into a movie. But secondly, people need to understand that I think a lot of people go to prison, especially police nowadays going to prison, and they never should have been there to begin with. And I'm inclined to believe that's the case with you because I don't see any smoking guns, so to speak.
No, there's none. I'm not the bad guy in this. These guys who set me up are the bad guy. They've done this. They've done this not only to law enforcement. They've done this to civilians. There's a lot of civilians in prison because of this homicide lieutenant and his DA investigator buddy, and those are all under investigation now. There's a special division now at the Harris County District Attorney's Office. They're actually have my own lawyer, but they're helping from stuff that went on 20, 30,
and I hope
years ago.
they find what they're looking for. Kent, and I'm inclined, I didn't say earlier, I look at ex-police or ex-law enforcement as leaving with a black mark. I don't think that's the case with you. I think you're a former law enforcement officer, and I'm sorry you went through this.
Well, look, I appreciate that. And you know what? I've been a law enforcement officer since I was a little kid. You know, that's all I ever wanted to do. And I came from a family where I didn't need to be a police officer, you know. And it's just like you know, once you do, you know, once it's what, like people say, being a law enforcement officer is not what you do, it's what you are.
It's what you are.
You know, every one of my buddies are police officers to this very day.
By the way, the name of the book is Reasonable Doubts, How to Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder. The best place to find Kent and contact him is on Facebook. His Facebook page is Kent McGowen. It's spelled McGowen 2025. Kent, thanks for your service and thanks for being a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for helping my family and I for letting us speak about this.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.